Good morning, dear respected teacher, dear respected community. Today is December the 27th, and we are still in the year 2018. We are in the Upper Hamlet Dharma Cloud Temple in Plum Village. Today we have a day of mindfulness, a day for everyone to nourish the energy of mindfulness inside of us and around us. In Buddhism, we speak of a particular mind, an energy, a source of energy that we all have inside of us. When we come to the practice center and to a community of practice, we learn to recognize this energy, we learn to recognize this mind. And this is our bodhichitta. It means the mind of love, or the beginner's mind. We all have a source of energy that pushes us to understand ourselves, to understand the ones around us, to understand our environment, because deep down inside, we want to love. There's a deep seed of love that is transmitted to us from our parents, our colleagues, our friends, and also nature itself. And with this energy, it gives us life, it gives us awareness. It helps us connect to everything around us. Our practice is to recognize the interbeing elements inside of us. Interbeing is an insight. This insight lets us know that we are not alone and that we are not exactly separated from everyone and everything. But actually, when you look within yourself, you can already recognize the non-you element. How can you be by yourself? You have to interbe with everything around you. When you look deep within yourself, you recognize the seed of mother and father inside of you. And looking deeper, you recognize your whole ancestral lineage. Your grandparents, your great-grandparents, to our society, to our nation, our whole culture. With this insight, it gives us an opportunity to be a wonderful continuation. We take our ancestors into the present moment, but at the same time into the future. So when we practice mindful breathing, we don't only breathe for ourselves, but we are breathing for our parents, for our ancestors. Maybe many of them have never had an opportunity to be in touch with a practice that helps us be present. And if we don't have this chance to learn to stop and learn to be with the energy of mindfulness inside of us, then our next generation will also not have this opportunity. So if we have a chance to practice and we have a chance to be in touch with the energy of mindfulness that is inside of us, and we nourish this practice, then we are also taking care of the future. If you yourself can do one mindful in-breath and one mindful out-breath, then this practice will be transmitted to the ones around you and also to the future generation. So practicing mindfulness is not just practicing for ourselves, but we are practicing for all of the ones that we love and also all of the ones that create suffering. Because with mindfulness, we learn to recognize the suffering that is inside of us and that is around us. As a practitioner, we have to have the courage to look inside. And first is to look inside of our own suffering in our daily life. Have we ever given ourselves this opportunity, this chance to sit and do nothing? Sit and just ask yourself, what are my suffering? What are my difficulties? What are my daily struggles? If we don't allow ourselves this deep looking, then we allow ourselves to continue to live with suffering, to continue to follow our natural habits. We may have the will to not suffer, but we have to have the practice to look deeply. And that is why to have time is part of meditation. If you want to meditate, you have to have time. And now we say time is money, right? And we can say well-being is also money. We pay to be well. But this is very free. Practice of mindfulness is free. You don't buy this in the market. But mindfulness is something that is very alive in each and every one of us. For some of us, it's buried very deep down, and we need conditions for it to manifest. But for some of us, maybe our parents were already a practitioner, or our friends have already shown us the practice of mindfulness, so the seed is already very alive. And when you come to a community or a practice center, that opportunity presents itself for the seed to manifest more frequently in our daily life. And we have to be able to recognize this energy, this beginner's mind. Once we recognize it, it may bring us a lot of joy. It may bring us a lot of happiness. It's like when you are hungry and you finally find food. And how simple is a piece of bread. But once you are starving and you have that piece of bread in your hand, and you know exactly the texture and the taste, and then you get to experience it. And then that experience, it gives you this enlightenment, this awakening, how wonderful this taste of bread, how wonderful it is to have something to eat. So it is like the same when you find a practice of mindfulness, you recognize it and you have to taste it. cannot breathe for you. I can share with you how to bring your awareness to the breath. But that is something that you have to experience for yourself. And once you have experienced that mindful breath, and you can recognize your mind calming down, taking refuge in the breath, and you start to feel and have a sense of ease. Maybe for the first time in many years, you allow yourself to have a moment of peace. Or maybe for the first time in your history, in your family, you were the first person to practice mindfulness. And once you recognize this, then there is holiness to the breathing. And your breath becomes a holy breath. And your breath is embodied with the energy of spirituality. So mindful breathing is the practice of cultivating the mind of love, cultivating our spiritual energy. And when you breathe in a way that brings lightness and brings freshness to yourself, then you are beginning to nourish your physical body. The first practice of mindfulness is to come home to the body. Because in our daily life, our practice is to return home. Home here is not France, it's not America, Vietnam, Canada. But home here is the present moment. To be in the here and now is our choice. The door to the present moment is always available. Whether we open the door and enter it is up to us. And with the mindful breathing, we have the key. And if we know how to use the key and to open that door, then the present moment becomes very alive. The now is very present. It's not in a book, it's not in a talk, but it becomes a reality. We have experienced 6 days of mindfulness with the community of Plum Village. And I hope that you have used this key to enter into the present moment. And when you are in the present moment, you give yourself an opportunity to see what is happening inside of me. Where is there pain in my body? Is there stress? Is there tension? Is there tension that is very alive, very present, that I am not aware of? And when you recognize that tension, you bring the light of mindfulness towards that tension, and you breathe with the tension. You give it your full awareness. And in this practice of full awareness, you offer love to your body. You offer love to the tension. And right away, there is a release. And this release is also the practice of letting go. We learn to let go of tension inside of our body, but at the same time, we learn to let go of the busy mind. Our mind is non-stop. There's a radio station inside, non-stop radio station. And if we don't know how to turn it off, then we will never have a chance to experience silence or stillness. And therefore, stillness and silence become something very awkward, something maybe a little bit frightening. If this was our first retreat, and we arrive on arrival day, and we come to the first sitting meditation, and the brother or sister may let us know, tonight we will have a session of 30 minutes of silent sitting, and we will do nothing. That may be a huge challenge for many of us, because silence can be very scary if we are not experienced in the practice, and if we do not allow ourselves to learn to be with silence. And our natural habit would be to make noise. And noise is in here. Because we think when there is emptiness, we need to occupy it. When there is nothing, we need to give it something. When we are doing nothing, we need to do something. We need to be proactive. We need to do to gain. But here, we need to learn to stop, to gain. To stop, to gain stillness. So with the first in-breath of mindfulness, you're gaining the capacity to be still. Stillness here first is in our mind. We bring the mind home to the in-breath and the out-breath. And we fully take refuge in the in-breath and the out-breath. We surrender to the in-breath and the out-breath. And when we learn to surrender, we learn to let go. And the in-breath and the out-breath has its power to guide us into the here and into the now. At the beginning, it may feel a little bit forceful, because we may not yet be used to riding the in-breath and the out-breath. We may feel like we're forcing the breathing. But what it may be happening is, our in-breath is saying, oh, he or she is paying attention to me. And he or she wants me to give it the best quality, so that naturally our breathing wants to give us the oxygen to nourish every cell in our body. So the in-breath and out-breath will do its part. And we just have to learn to guide and take refuge in the in-breath and the out-breath. And the more we become one with the breathing, the more the breathing becomes delicious. Have you ever tasted your breathing? It's actually very delicious. Because with mindfulness, there is stillness and peace with the breath. And once you have tasted mindful breathing, then you know, this is what mindfulness is. This is what I need to nourish in my daily life. This is what I have to practice to nourish my beginner's mind, my mind of love. Because if we want to love someone, we have to know how to love ourselves. It's very important. And to love ourselves, we have to know how to understand. And to understand, we need time. And when we practice sitting meditation and doing nothing, that is allowing ourselves time. And that is giving us the opportunity to cultivate the wonderful qualities that are inside of us. There are qualities that have been transmitted by our ancestors, by our parents. And some of these elements are very precious, something that we recognize and we would like to bring into the future. But at the same time, there are some seeds, some qualities that does not bring us joy and that not bring us happiness. And some suffering that is there and we don't know why we suffer. We don't know why, where it comes from. But it may have been transmitted to us through our ancestors, through our parents. And if we don't recognize this, and we don't have a chance to practice with it and to transform it, we would then also transmit this quality, this element, this seed into the future, to the future generation. Whether it's our children, our student, or our loved ones. Because our way of being is also a teaching. Our way of being is a transmission in itself. The first teachers to our children is ourselves. If we want our children to grow up as a loving person, to have love, compassion, then us as parents, us as elders, as a brother, as a sister, as a teacher, we have to learn to cultivate that love and that compassion inside. Because if we don't have it, it's very hard to transmit. It's very hard to offer. So if we want to offer the best to the ones that we truly love, we have to cultivate those wonderful qualities inside of us. We have to recognize the love inside of us. We have to give ourselves love, care, tenderness. We have to be able to say, today I will allow myself to be embraced by the energy of loving kindness. Sometimes we don't allow ourselves to love because we're too used to suffering. It becomes a habit. It becomes a shell that we are comfortable with. Maybe sometimes we recognize ourselves and we identify ourselves with that suffering. And if we say, I need to let go of that suffering, then we may feel quite empty. But here, we learn to embrace the suffering. We don't fight the suffering. We learn to recognize what is the mud. What is it that is causing me suffering? I have to recognize the suffering inside and have to see the source of the suffering. The first noble truth in Buddhism is suffering. And why is it noble? Because it teaches us how to love and how to understand. And once we recognize the source of the suffering, then we find a way out. And we find a practice to not nourish that suffering. The Buddha says everything survives with food. Our love and our suffering is the same. Happiness and suffering is very connected. If we have suffered, then we have the chance to learn and to be happy. And if we experience happiness, but we don't nourish happiness, then suffering will have a chance to manifest. But with the practice of mindfulness, concentration, and insight, then we are not afraid of suffering. Because we know that suffering, it comes and it goes, and it is impermanent. Everything is impermanent. Our suffering is impermanent. But our happiness and our joy is also impermanent. And if we don't know how to nourish our joy and our happiness, then our suffering is very alive. But if we know how to recognize the suffering inside first, and then we recognize the suffering around us, and then we know the source of the suffering, and then we know what to do in our daily life to balance our energy. If we are always in a busy city, and it's hard for us to have peace and have stillness in our mind and in our surrounding, then what we need to nourish ourselves is nature, stillness, community of practice. And those of us who experience the journey to come to Plum Village is quite a distance. Huh? We take a flight, we take a train, and then we get picked up from the station. And if we're lucky, the monks and nuns are on time to pick us up. If not, we have to wait. And then from there, it's another 30 minutes. Before I became a monk, I actually really liked that journey because it gives me a chance to slow down. From the city, I come to the countryside, and then I see the fields, I see the cows. If you come in the summer, you see the sunflowers. And so all of this surrounding, somehow it gives you the chance to remove some layers off, some dust from the city. And then you come into a place where there's not as much stimulation for our senses. So our mind has a chance to be more still and be more at ease. And if we are someone who has a seed of anger that is very alive, then we have to recognize what are the trigger points. What is it that is making us angry all the time? Is it our surroundings? Is it the media, the news? It's good to know what is going on in the world. But moderation is very important. Just like how we enjoy our meals here, one of the contemplation in the 5 contemplation is learning moderation, to not overeat. But information is the same. News is the same. We have to be moderate with ourselves. And we have to feed ourselves also good information, good news. If we are constantly being fed with violence, anger, and fear, then naturally those seeds, those qualities inside of us becomes very strong. Even though we are not in the war zone, but if we keep feeding ourselves with this information, with this news, without concretely finding a way to bring peace into the world, then that news may not be nourishing for us. That suffering may not bring us insight. It may drag us down. It may become very heavy. So to find the balance is very important. In Buddhism, we speak of the middle way. To know not to be too lazy, but not to be too strict with ourselves. But to find the balance, that there is enough relaxation, but enough stability. So in our way of consuming is very important. What we hear, what we see, what we smell, where we place ourselves, in the city, in the mall, in the bar, it's all our nutriment, our nourishment. And if we have a chance, we sit down and we meditate on our own well-being. You write down what are the nourishment in our daily life. What are the things that brings us joy? This is meditation. If you learn to look within yourself and you start to recognize the good qualities inside of you, you may realize one page is not enough. We have to be able to just see, to recognize and to say, having good eyes is a joy. To be able to wake up every morning and to look and to see the beauty of life around you, to see the many colors, to see your loved ones, that should be a joy. Check mark that right away. To have good lungs in order to breathe, that brings us the awareness and the responsibility to take care of our well-being. To see that you still are well enough to sit, to walk, to stand freely and stably. That should be a check mark right there. Once we start to identify and recognize these simple conditions of happiness, then we start to not take life for granted. And we don't take for granted our well-being. Our practice here is not to wait to suffer to practice. We practice when we are well. We practice when we are happy. When you are happy, you practice to become more happy. When you are at peace, you practice to nourish more peace. Because there's too much suffering already. We don't need to create more suffering. Or we might have a whole baggage of suffering transmitted to us. And in meditation, we learn not to drown in our suffering. We learn to balance. So if a suffering arises, and we, just like our in-breath, I am aware, this is my in-breath, this is my out-breath. And if a suffering arises, it's like, this is a suffering. And we have to learn to call it by its true name. What is the suffering? Is it jealousy? Is it fear? Is it anger? Is it loneliness? What is it? We have to learn to identify and call it by its true name. And once you have recognized and you call it by its true name, you learn to embrace and that suffering, because that suffering is you. And that suffering has a chance to transform. And the more we recognize, the more the suffering becomes smaller and smaller. So let us listen to a sound of the bell and just to come back to our in-breath and our out-breath. Fully take refuge in this, in-breath and out-breath. It should allow us 3 deep in and out. The breathing in the community has a very strong peace and stillness. And when we can be embraced by this energy and we allow ourselves to be in this environment, we also allow the peace and the stillness inside of us to mature. And after we have meditated on the well-being, the qualities that bring us joy and happiness, we take an opportunity to then recognize what are our suffering. What is our day-to-day suffering? Something that we recognize every day. Am I too dispersed? Am I too outside of my body and too lost in confusion? Are the seed of anger too strong? Am I feeling more lonely these days? And we start to identify and we write it down. And this is the practice of meditation. This is looking deeply and very concretely to note it down. And it may be 1 page, half a page of suffering. Be selective with suffering, not too much, moderation. It's like with sweets, you can enjoy it more. But some food that are bitter, just enough. But bitterness sometimes is very good for us. Have you ever had bitter melon? It's probably one of my least favorite vegetables. But I know that bitter melon is very cooling for the body and it's very good for your liver. And so the same thing with suffering. A little bit of it gives us a chance to practice. It gives us a chance to be with mindfulness. Because once you look deeply into your suffering, you start to have compassion. Compassion first for yourself. And then you have compassion for the others around you. And in suffering, you start to have understanding of suffering. You have to recognize what is it that brings you suffering. Is it because I listen too much to news and I feed myself too much of that information? Is it because the seed of anger, I don't take care of it and I let it overtake myself? Or is it because whenever I feel an emptiness, a void inside of me, I look for consumption? Whether it is food. Have you ever find yourself just going to the fridge for no reason? It's like, wait a minute, I'm not hungry. If you have that moment, that's mindfulness right there. It's like, that is refrigerator meditation. You say, okay, close the door. Or do you find yourself being pulled away by an energy? Right? We have to recognize, none of us can do this for you. I can only share with you my experience. But you have to put in the work. And then the third section of our practice is then to write down what is it that we will do to nourish our mindfulness, our concentration. And what is it that we will do to change and to transform our habit energy. Our teacher, back in the days when CDs were still a thing, everything is streaming now. Our teacher used to have a practice called changing the CD. And because as a practitioner, once you have the awareness, then you are in control of yourself. You become your own master. And if you recognize what you are doing that is not nourishing for you, you have to learn to change the CD. It's like if you are listening to a very bad CD, why continue to listen to it? Have the courage, press the stop button, open the CD, and take another CD and put it in. It's called changing the CD. Or another word, name for it is changing the peg. When there's an old peg that needs to be replaced, you put a new one in and you hammer it and you replace it. So our practice is not you fight with negativity. We are non-violent. We have to be non-violent with ourselves also. But there's a skillfulness that we can master. And that skillfulness is to transform our consumption, transform our way of being, transform our habit energy. And I hope that in our 7 days of practice here, we can pick up a few practice of new soundtracks to play in our daily life. When we listen to the sound of the bell, we automatically stop when we're in Plum Village, because that has been transmitted to us, this practice. Whenever the sound of the bell or even the chime of the clock, you see everyone around you stopping. So automatically, collective energy, we also learn to stop. Right? So this is something very simple, but something very practical. We all have smartphones, we all have computers. And did you know we have a Plum Village app? And you can put a mindfulness bell in your device. And you can put the timer every 15, 30, 45, or 1 hour. And then you allow yourself a chance to nourish and cultivate your bodhichitta, your mind of love. When you're driving the car, and you come to a red light, is that a friend or an enemy? That red light with the eyes of mindfulness, you said, it's a chance to do nothing, sit back and enjoy my breathing. We learn to take control of our surrounding. If you're in traffic, if you're in Paris or Los Angeles or New York, there's a thing called car raging. You've ever heard of it? People who just are very angry drivers. And at the beginning, we weren't an angry driver. I think at the beginning, we all enjoy driving. Oh, I have my license, I have my car. But slowly, we become more angry and angry as a driver. So now we learn to recognize our way of driving. And if we can transform the energy while we're at the red light or we're sitting in the transformation, sitting in traffic, and there is peace inside, then there's a chance for peace in the world. I'm serious. If we can be at ease with a red light, then we can learn to be at peace with happiness around us. And we experience walking meditation every day here. And to walk is a freedom we all have. Every step that we take has the ability to bring peace and to bring stability. You know, every step we take on this planet, it has our seal. Our teacher teaches us that when we pass on, but everything we do in our body, our speech, and our mind is our continuation. So what we say, it bears our signature. What we do in our daily life, our way of being, a way of opening the door, the way of closing the door, the way of serving food, all of that bears our signature. And when we walk, and we walk with peace, it leaves behind the seal of peace. And if more and more of our community, of our society, can walk in this way, then our environment and our planet and our society will become more peaceful and will become more well. Because once peace is there and stability is there, then our way and our responsibility is also very, very alive, very true. Because if we have already tasted peace, then how can we continue to live in a way that leads to destruction? So experiencing peace, as we are practitioners, we all have the responsibility to not contribute more to the depletion of our planet. The new year is coming up, and the new year gives us this opportunity to really reflect on our way of being. And as a community, we don't only reflect as an individual, but we reflect as a community, as a society, and as humans on this earth. We have to recognize that we are not the only ones, and we are not the only privileged ones. And we have to be responsible for our way of being. We do not wait for others. We do not wait for the scientists to tell us what to do, for us what to do. They have already shared many, many years. But we have all ignored it. And concretely, what can we do as a person part of this earth, part of this ecosystem, part of this environment? In Plum Village, every Tuesday or every Wednesday, depending on the monastery, we have a practice called the practice of No Car Day. That already is a contribution to the awareness of the environment. And we have lately learned that one of the big causes to global warming is the consumption of meat. The meat industry brings a lot of pollution and brings a big destruction to our environment and to life. And we learn that even if we are able to reduce by half, then our planet has a very bright future, more of a bright future. And here in Plum Village, we are already practicing this. All of us are practicing vegetarian. And with this practice, we nourish compassion inside of us. Because all life, all animals also have love, also know what pain and suffering is. And when we know that we don't add to that pain and suffering, then that compassion inside of us is nourished. We are not 100% here because we know already in the vegetable, sometimes there are bugs that we crush. When we walk, we know we are not fully incapable of not harming all living beings, but we do the best we can, and we nourish the compassion inside of us. I know one brother in the Upper Hamlet. He made a vow for 2019. He will not buy a new clothes, a new jacket or new sweater, nothing. And he will really practice the calligraphy that our teacher wrote. You have enough. Because as consumers, we have to be responsible. What we consume is our choice. So we all can find ways in nourishing our happiness and also our responsibility to our environment and to our society. And collectively, if we can do it as a community, then we can become an awakened Sangha, an awakened community. Our teacher shared that in our time, one Buddha is not enough. And in his eyes, the next Buddha will be the community, will be a Sangha. Many awakened mind will have to nourish and practice together in order to hold and to bring more peace and more well-being for our planet. So in our third practice of writing down our practices, first we can recognize what are the the spiritual practice that we can do for ourselves to nourish ourselves. And then we can then select what can we do in our daily life to nourish the well-being of ourselves, but also for our society, our planet. We don't have to sit 30 minutes a day. We don't have to do 1 hour of walking meditation. But 10 minutes is a lot already. Or even 3 in-breath and out-breath. But don't lose it. Don't lose the beginner's mind. Because it's like a fire that gives us the motivation, that gives us the strength in order to nourish this practice in our daily life. And if we can, in our house or in our apartment, we have a living room, we have a dining room, we have a kitchen, we have a bedroom. We should have a breathing room or a breathing corner. And our teacher has shared in his view that in the 21st century, a modern house should have a breathing room or a breathing corner, a place where we can nourish our well-being. We may have a cushion, a mat, a flower, incense, or we can also bring home a bell of mindfulness. The bell is very essential for the Plum Village practice. It becomes a dear friend in our community. A Plum Village Sangha without a bell is not exactly a Plum Village Sangha yet. And if you are a Sangha member, a facilitator, a monk, a nun, and if you don't know how to invite the bell, you are also have a long time in order to become a solid practitioner, because inviting the bell is something very essential for our practice. It's very essential for our own well-being, because we recognize that it is a friend. So to conclude my sharing today, I would like to share with you how to invite the bell. We have many bells in our community. We have the big bells, the great temple bells, the activity bells, but also the day-to-day mindfulness bell in many sizes. We have king size, there's a queen size at that end, and we also have the mini bells where we can put in our pocket. And our Dharma teacher of Plum Village, everywhere you go, you bring your bell with you. Our teacher had a dream one time, and in his dream, he found out that he was accepted into a very prestige and high college of music. And as the class was assembling, somehow it was his turn to do a presentation of music. But he said, "But I'm not a musician. I cannot play the piano or the guitar or the violin or the cello." And as he was stumbling to look for an instrument, he put his hand in his pocket, and the bell was inside. And when he took grip of the bell, he felt, I got this. And he was very confident. Because Thai knew if it's playing one instrument and something that he had mastered, it is the bell. And as the teacher was coming, he heard that the teacher was a teacher that was very well loved and very acknowledged among all the schools. And the surrounding was very beautiful, maybe like Upper Hamlet. And as the teacher was coming, he woke up. He woke up from the dream. And he said, "Oh, I need to sleep a little bit more just to see who this teacher is." But it never happened. And he had the intuition that maybe it would be the Buddha coming in. But from that dream, he knew that as a practitioner of mindfulness, our breathing is our strings of music. But to invite the strings of music to play, there's something very concrete that we can practice, and that is inviting the bell. And we don't say we hit the bell or we strike the bell, but we say we invite the bell. And usually the bell also has a cushion. The bell is like a practitioner. It sits on a cushion. But I don't know where the cushion is. So he will sit on the floor today. And before we invite the bell, we have to be one with the bell. It's like when you invite your friends to your house, you prepare your house. So when you want to invite the bell, you have to prepare yourself. Because the way you invite the bell and the way you take care and you address the bell, it gives it spiritual energy or holiness. That's up to you. If you don't take it seriously, then the bell is just a piece of iron, of metal, etc. But if you respect it like a friend, then that bell becomes a Dharma instrument. It becomes a spiritual friend. The same with your cushion. You know, when I first came to Plum Village, I said, why are the monks and nuns bowing to the cushion? Right? And I just did it because everyone did it. But as I learned, even the mat and the cushion, if you pay respect and you treat it with care, then that becomes your Dharma instrument. That becomes a condition for you to be mindful, to nourish concentration, and for you to have insight. So the bell is the same. So usually before we invite the bell, we bow to the bell. And the bowing in the Buddhist tradition is not just a form, but it is a practice. It's like a lotus bud, a lotus flower. And you offer this lotus to someone who you bow to. And it also represents your mind and your body coming home to the present moment, united. And you bow to the bell. And if the bell is a big bell on the cushion, you let it on the cushion. But if it's a small bell, you bring it up and you invite it into your palm, to your hand. And then you breathe at least 3 times. And we have a Gatha. A Gatha is like a poem. And we recite it before we invite the bell. And the Gatha goes like this. With body, speech, and mind, in perfect oneness. I send my heart along with the sound of the bell. May the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend the path of anxiety and sorrow. And after you have recited the Gatha and you have breathed in and out mindfully, and then you wake up the bell. It's a half sound. And the half sound is to let everyone around you know that a full sound is coming. So everyone, when you hear the half sound, everybody prepares to listen to the bell and to breathe in and out mindfully 3 times. So we don't want to shock anybody or to invite it and not have people prepare, because the bell should be an invitation. Everything in the practice is an invitation. We invite you to practice. We invite you to breathe. We invite you to listen. So the sound of the bell is the same. We invite you to come back to the present moment. So once you have wake up the sound, if it's a big crowd, like this meditation hall, you can do a second wake up, and it can be a little bit stronger. And then with your mindfulness, if you are in tune with the community, with the people around you, you know when they are ready to listen. Once you hear the room has calmed and is ready, then you invite the full sound. And when you invite the bell, you don't strike it down, but it's almost like a circular movement. And there's an image you can have, it's like a flock of birds inside, and you invite and all the birds will fly out. And one bell should allow yourself as well as the others to enjoy 3 in-breath and out-breath. So your in-breath and your out-breath is the measurement for the next sound. And when the sound is invited, we can recite a Gatha, another poem. And it goes like this. I listen. This wonderful sound of the bell brings me back to my true home. The true home, what we have learned, is in the here and the now. So I listen. This sound of the bell brings me back to my true home. And after you have allowed yourself as well as the ones in the Sangha, in the group, to enjoy the breathing 3 times, then you invite the next. So with this practice, you allow your community, you allow your friends to enjoy at least 3 sounds of 3 sound, which is 9 in-breath and out-breath. And once you are finished, you place the bell back down with 2 hands, put the inviter down, and you bow 1 time. And you offer it your gratitude, because the bell is like a friend that allows us, and is something that unites all of us, brings us in unison with the in-breath and the out-breath. And practicing inviting the bell is an art. It's very simple, but it can be very difficult. Because inviting the bell, it should go along with your practice energy. The more you are more at peace and at ease, then the more the sound of the bell has quality in your practice. Believe it or not, but our teacher usually tells us, when he watches us invite the bells, he knows where our practice is. And Thai says sometimes it takes 10 years to become a good bell master. And I can confess to that, it does take many years. Because inviting the bell, it brings your whole awareness to it. And you have to be solid to collect the whole group of practitioners. Because the quality of the bell has the energy to unite all of us. And when we practice and to invite the bell with stability, also our practice as a facilitator becomes more solid. In Plum Village, we always begin with 3 sound of the bell and end with 3 sound of the bell. In all of our meetings, we always start with 3 sound and end with 3 sound. And sometimes when emotions are high and tensions are high in our meeting, the facilitator, the bell master, invites the community to listen to the sound of the bell. So the sound of the bell is like a teacher. It helps all of us to come back to the present moment, to listen, to breathe. I know some teachers, some educators in our community have brought this into their classrooms. Some of them, if their school is open enough, they actually have a bell. But in some schools, because of the rules and regulation, they don't use the bell, but they use another form. Some do a clap. The whole class, at the beginning, before to start, the whole class clap. And everybody enjoys just breathing. I was once invited to be a guest speaker at one of the class in the university. And that professor, what he does before he begins the class, instead of inviting the bell, he asks the whole class to stand up together and stand in a circle. And just by standing in a circle, he say, now let all of us enjoy 3 deep in breath and 3 deep out breath. It's the same principle of coming back to the body and the mind and being aware of the in-breath and the out-breath. And the quality of the room became very high. Everyone let go of what they were thinking and doing and just came back to the in-breath and the out-breath. It's so simple, but it is so powerful. And just like that, you have a moment of stillness and a moment of peace in your daily life. So if you have a chance to bring a bell home, and you have a chance to practice inviting the bell. And inviting the bell doesn't have to be for anyone. It can be just for you. It's very practical, very concrete. We can start our day with 3 sound of the bell and end our day with 3 sound of the bell before we go to sleep. So the bell of mindfulness is an instrument that helps us in our daily life. But there can be many bells of mindfulness in our daily life. Whether we are at a park, you see birds, you hear birds singing, that can be a bell of mindfulness to remind us to come back to the breathing. If you are in a European country like France, and you're in a village, a town, and you hear the bell of the church, that's also a chance to just stop, listen, and enjoy breathing. So listening to the bell has no form. Anything can be a bell. So find your bell of mindfulness in your daily life for you to nourish and for you to cultivate your beginner's mind, your mind of love. It's very pure, it's very precious. This energy. And you have all had the chance to be in touch with it for our 7-day retreat here. And with the coming new year, I wish all of you a happy continuation, a year of good health, good well-being, and to continue to cultivate the seed of love and the seed of compassion inside of you. Because that love and that compassion is very needed for yourself, but as well as for everyone around you. And that seed of love and that compassion, that understanding, you cannot buy that. It has to be cultivated by our practice. And when you have it, you can offer it. And this is a present that we can give to all of our loved ones. The presence of our well-being, our happiness. So go home, when you are home, practice hugging meditation. It's a new Dharma door. It's very rare in the Buddhist tradition, hugging meditation. But the story is while our teacher was in America calling for peace during the Vietnam War. I think he was at the airport going to Chicago. And during his trip, of course, he had the chance to teach mindfulness. And he had many followers also. And at one of, before leaving at the airport, one woman, I assume, just admired Thai so much and just came and hugged him. And this is back in like the 60s or 70s. And it is very rare for a Vietnamese Buddhist monk to be hugged by a woman. So Thai froze. And he shared in his story, he was like a log of wood, a piece of wood, like very stiff. And somehow, he said, because he was exiled from Vietnam, and he never gave up the dream and never gave up the aspiration to continue to practice mindfulness and to cultivate a community of practitioners. And he knew if I had to grow my community in the West, there are some practices in the West, I can make it a mindfulness practice. So then hugging meditation was born. And hugging meditation is very beautiful. It's not your hug and a pat, pat, pat on the back. The hug has quality. The hug has the energy of presence. So when you are in front of someone who you admire and you would like to express your appreciation, Brother Dao King, I admire you, my brother. Please come up. He's a little red. But it's true, I do admire my brother. And when the practices, before you hug, you have to bow. And in your bow, hand back here. The practice is you come back to your in-breath and your out-breath. And you recognize the person in front of you. And you know who he or she is. And you have to collect yourself so that you are there for him or for her. And after you are present, you bow. And then you practice to hug that person. And in the hug, like I said, it's not a pat, 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 pat. It's a real practice. You breathe in and out 3 times. And in the first in-breath, you contemplate and you recognize, I am here for that person. And in the second in-breath and out-breath, you recognize that that person is there for you. And in the third practice of in-breath and out-breath, you know that he or she is of the nature of impermanence. And that in 100 years, he or she and you will not be there. So you value that person and you don't take that person's presence for granted. And with this awareness, that hug has the energy of healing. That hug has the energy of connection, of interbeing, and also of gratitude. So today, we have learned many practices, but this is something that we can all do, and I'm sure there are those of us at home waiting for an embrace. We don't have to bow if it becomes awkward for that person, but you can stand and say, wait, don't hug me yet. So as you share, I've learned in Plum Village that before I hug, I should truly be there. And once you are truly there, then that hug becomes a mindful hug. Some of our monastic brothers and sisters also learn to hug a tree. The tree is also a living being. It's very a part of this world. And if you feel disconnected from Mother Earth, from nature, practice hugging a tree. You find a place where it's just you and the tree. There's no people thinking that it's a little bit awkward. And you really practice this. And there's also a lot of healing and a lot of nourishment in that. One time, we were in Sequoia Park in America, and the sequoia trees are massive. And I think our teacher, Tai, he called about 12 brothers and sisters, and we did a collective hug. And all 12 of us took 3 deep in-breath and out-breath as we hugged the tree. And it's very, very healing. It's very nourishing. So all of this is very free, huh? We don't have to buy something that we can do and we can offer. Thank you, dear friends.